I'm Shawn Mullin along with David Zammit from the broadcast crew for Robertson Family Group. Swift Current Broncos hockey on the Eagle 94.1. It's a big day for Swift Current Bronco fans and the Broncos in general as they make a deal ahead of tomorrow's WHL trade deadline, acquiring 20-year-old forward Ryley Lindgren from the Lethbridge Hurricanes. In exchange, Carson Dick is headed to Lethbridge as well as a third-round pick in the 2018 Bantam Draft. The Broncos also get back a sixth-round pick in that 2018 Bantam Draft. The main crux of the deal, though, is acquiring Lindgren and giving up Dick. And from a Swift Current perspective, Lindgren maybe not a guy we expected to see. You and I talked a lot about potential 20-year-old options on our broadcast, and because Lethbridge is a contending team, you wouldn't have expected someone like Lindgren, who is a point-per-game player with 42 points in 42 games, to become available from a team like that. But he does, because Lethbridge goes out and they get both Zach Zabrowski and Matt Alfaro from the Kootenay Ice. That means they had 4 overage players on their roster. Someone had to go, and that opened the door for the Broncos to go in and get Lindgren.
It's an interesting move for the Hurricanes to be giving up on a guy like Lindgren. Alfaro and him have very similar numbers. They play the same position, so it's interesting to see what maybe they see in Alfaro that they didn't in Lindgren. But Lindgren is noted as a 200-foot game, and he has that offensive threat, and that just adds another weapon to the Broncos' artillery.
And I think if you look at it from Lethbridge's perspective, you're able to bring in 2 guys that grew up together with the Kootenay Ice, and Alfaro and Zabrowski. They can come in and be aligned together. But yes, that did force them to have to give up on a guy like Lindgren, and the Broncos benefit from that. And also benefit in that they're not paying quite the price that some other teams have had to pay for the impact overage forwards they've picked up. And part of that is because they feel like they would have difficulty recruiting Carson Dick, who was a second-round draft pick for the Broncos in the most recent 2016 Bantam Draft. Apparently, according to CTV Regina's Daryl Romold, Dick is actually committed to Penn State in the NCAA, so it'll be up to Lethbridge to convince him to be a Western Hockey League player, and maybe they'll have success doing that, given that his father Mike was a former coach of the Hurricanes and Carson is from Lethbridge. But the Broncos feeling like maybe getting Dick would have been a problem makes it a little easier to swallow the price of Dick at a third-round pick going to Lethbridge.
Well, and speaking about the prices, look at the price that Aaron Irvine went for, and Lane Bauer.
No, a number of players that were dealt, that were 20-year-olds, got a big haul back for the team that were trading them away. And the Broncos have said, in talking to Jamie Porter, their director of hockey operations today, they were a little put off by some of those prices and wouldn't have been able to get into the mix or something like that. This trade happened to work out for them. It's almost like the dominoes of these deals coming together fit perfectly for Swift Current. They were looking for that right-handed shot as well. They were looking to get another forward to complement their group, and Lindgren does just that. A guy who scored 27 goals last season for the Hurricanes, a guy who's got playoff experience from his time in Brandon and his time in Lethbridge, a guy who's got leadership experience. He brings a lot to round out the Broncos roster. And on top of that, and we've discussed this, other teams, when they've made moves for 20-year-olds, have had to give up a 20-year-old in the process, just like Lethbridge did today. The Broncos had 2 open 20-year-old spots this season. They get Ryan Graham from Saskatoon for 2nd and 4th round Bantam Draft picks, and now they get Lindgren from Lethbridge for Dick, who wasn't on their roster yet. He's underage, and a 3rd round pick. So Swift Current adds to their roster without having to give up anything that's on their roster currently, just strengthening their team and making them a deeper roster heading towards the playoffs.
Well, the Broncos had that luxury all season. They only had the 1 overager in Calvin Spencer, and they were looking all season to add the 2 overagers to fill those spots, to make it 3. And they had that luxury to go out and get those guys, and they obviously did, and they got 2 really big-time players in Ryan Graham and Ryan Lindgren.
And when you look at what happened with Moose Jaw, for example, they acquire a Thomas Foster from Vancouver yesterday. When they make that deal, they have to give up a player who was on their roster, and they release Dakota Odgers and get nothing back for him. The Broncos were in a position where they don't have to run into that problem. But, of course, when you look at Moose Jaw as well, a team you're chasing for 2nd place in the East Division, and a team that you feel like you're going to be in the mix with for a potential playoff round, they get a 20-year-old, well, the Broncos get one the next day. And I know it wasn't a response. They were already working on this. But from a fan perspective, I'm sure it's good to see that while Moose Jaw got stronger, the Broncos also got stronger.
And that's what you want as a fan perspective. Now, going back to the trade a little more, what do you think Lindgren can bring to the team?
Well, it's very obvious that he has the scoring punch that can add to the lineup. already 14 goals in the season, already 42 points on the season, 27 goals last year as mentioned. He's someone who can step in, play a top 6 role, put numbers on the board. It'll offer an interesting situation though from a coaching standpoint as to how you line him up. He's been a centerman with the Lethbridge Hurricanes this season. The Broncos have Glenn Godden and Lane Peterson up the middle right now. They've got other guys like Hepo Niemi who have been centermen in their career before. Connor Chalk is their third-line center. So does Lindgren move to the wing? Does somebody else move to the wing? Do you automatically put Lindgren into the top 6? Or do you try something where he's a focal point of another line so that you can maybe have 3 scoring lines moving forward for Swift Current? The options are there, and it's something the Broncos coaching staff can experiment with. They've got a lot of time to experiment with it, but it's another weapon that they have moving forward.
And that's something that you want as a coach, to have multiple options. You don't want to have just 1 line or 2 lines deep.
Right.
If you're going to win in this league, you have to at least be 3 lines deep, and the Broncos have certainly added to that today, and they've certainly solidified their roster a little more with this acquisition. Now, going back to what Moose Jaw has done, and what the Hurricanes have done, I think the Broncos, the Hurricanes, and the Warriors have closed that gap a little more on the top 2 teams, the Medicine Hat Tigers and the Regina Pats.
Well, certainly when you look at the Eastern Conference, and we've discussed this, it looks like there's a couple of tiers of contenders in the Eastern Conference right now. Regina, a little bit ahead of Medicine Hat, but those 2 teams on top of their respective divisions would probably be the favorites in the conference. But right behind them, the Warriors, the Broncos, and the Hurricanes are that next cluster of contenders. And when you look back through the years, it's not always the first or second place team that goes to the Western Hockey League final. When you're in that group of contenders, you give yourself a chance. If you get hot and you gel as a team at the right time in the playoffs, anything can happen. I remember the Kootenay Ice when they acquired Cody Eakin 7 years ago, were in 4th place in the conference when they went on their run and they won the WHL title. So there's lots of opportunity for the Broncos and the other contenders in this conference. Everybody in that group has tried to get better heading into the playoff push, and it should be a very close and interesting battle down the stretch. Now, we're not done yet either with the trade deadline. One more day before the deadline, the Broncos could make some more additions. It looks like they're still talking. They're in the midst of conversations with other teams. And doesn't mean they're going to make a move, but they did say to us on the weekend they were comfortable with their group now. They weren't necessarily going to add unless the price was right, and that's the same line we're getting now. They're still in those conversations. They're still open to add to their team, but it has to be the right price, and we'll see within the next day whether or not the Broncos get a little bit more of a boost heading towards their playoff push. Next action for Swift Current is Wednesday, and that should be interesting. The Kootenay Ice are in town. Kootenay just making that move, sending Zabrowski and Alfaro to Lethbridge. They get Brett Davis, they get Colton Croker, and they get draft picks back. So a new-look Kootenay Ice Club will be here on Wednesday, and the Broncos should have their new addition in the lineup as well. I'm Shawn Mullin with David Zammit. You can listen to us, and hopefully you'll be live at the game at the Credit Union Iplex Wednesday. But we'll have the call with Robertson Family Group Swift Current Broncos Hockey on the Eagle 94.1.